The ongoing violence and worsening humanitarian situation in Myanmar has sparked alarm, with the United Nations trying to foster a global response. Its Special Envoy Nalin Hazer spoke to CNA in an exclusive interview, and she told Leong Wai-kit that she's rallying ASEAN and Myanmar's neighbours to form a regional protection framework to help those suffering from the crisis. Dr. Hazer also warned that the upcoming elections could trigger even more violence.
It's been 2 years since the military takeover, and the impact on the country and the people have been devastating. It is extremely difficult to negotiate or mediate the entirety of the problem, but it is possible to mediate on specific problems and find solutions on behalf of what people need and to reduce the suffering of the people. And I've been doing it in 4 ways. Firstly, to put the regional protection framework on the agenda of ASEAN and of the neighboring countries, to ensure that, if possible, even to have a monitoring system in the region to basically to monitor the level of violence and to kind of reduce it. I'm also working very closely with both the ethnic leaders and the democratic leaders to convene an inclusive humanitarian forum, and hopefully through that to increase greater support cross-border, as well as greater flexibility in terms of donor reporting as well, so that the humanitarian aid can reach the people who are most in need in the areas of active conflict. Thirdly, I am upscaling. I'm working with the OIC and other partners to improve and to upscale the education aspirations of the Rohingyas and of host communities, and that will provide them with hope and the aspirations that they all seek. And fourthly, I am convening and advancing the Women, Peace and Security agenda to ensure that the leadership and the agency of women would be central to any movement to reset the democratic, human rights and the governance deficit for the future of Myanmar.
It's been 2 years since the military launched a coup in Myanmar. The killings have not stopped. The airstrikes are still ongoing, but nothing has improved. Have we failed in the last 2 years?
I've been spending my time engaging with people on the ground. They made it extremely clear to me in one line, a reset to address the human rights, democratic and governance deficit in the country.
But how do you think we can reset that?
We have to listen to what people are saying, and I have actually engaged with the ethnic leaders, with the democratic leaders, with civil society leaders, with refugee representatives, with women's groups, and also with the military. Right? So from the point of view of the communities, several things they have said. Firstly, when it comes to humanitarian assistance, don't just use the military channels, because most of the people who require humanitarian aid happens to live in the areas of active conflict and in areas controlled by the ethnic administration. When I meet refugee representatives, all people at the border, what they want is greater protection. And what they are saying to me is that you cannot, please prevent us from being deported.
On the note on humanitarian aid, how much of it has actually reached people on the ground?
According to the UN, they've reached about 3 million over people, but that's not enough. We also have to understand that this humanitarian crisis is due to a political crisis, and that the military is using its four-cut strategies, i.e. to reduce food supply, financial support, to prevent information and recruitment in some of the areas of active conflict.
You have vast experience working with the Myanmar army. You've been involved also in Cyclone Nargis. But is your experience and your background still relevant today when you're dealing with this generation of the Myanmar army, including Min Aung Hlaing?
He invited me, and we had an interesting conversation that lasted for 3 hours and 10 minutes. And during that time, I tried my best to come up with practical steps that he can take in order to implement the ASEAN or whatever remains of the 5-point consensus, because there are 3 that is highly dependent on the military to implement, i.e. to end the violence, to provide humanitarian aid without any discrimination, and to engage with constructive dialogue to see whether it is where it is possible to have a negotiated political solution.
We know that the army is planning for elections, and if we go down that path, if they do hold elections and if they do win, would the UN, would you be forced into recognizing them as the legitimate government because they've held fair and free elections, in their words?
This is an election that the people do not want. And the people see this as an attempt to supplant the 2020 NLD landslide. The position of the UN has always been to be in solidarity with the people, and the Secretary General himself has said that he is extremely concerned with the elections. For me, the election will be a trigger point for greater violence. It will prolong the crisis and will make the return to a democratic path and to a path of stability more difficult.
During a meeting with Min Aung Hlaing, he did mention that there's a possibility of sending Ms. Suu Kyi back from jail to house arrest. During your interactions with him, did you get a sensing that this could come true?
I hope he will keep his word, because she needs to, first of all, she needs to be free. And until she is free, let's send her back, at least to her home. But at the end of the day, we are talking about the release of political prisoners.
Can I ask you about your engagements with all stakeholders, including, or rather especially, the National Unity Government?
Well, I have engaged with the ethnic leaders, with the democratic leaders, with NUG, with CRPH, with NUCC, with community leaders. I don't go out and literally just share everything that I'm doing, because I believe that action, at the end of the day, outcomes should actually be the one that will reflect the work that is being done.
What would you say to a Myanmar person on the ground who thinks that the international community is not doing enough?
There are different parts of the UN that is doing work that is very obvious, but at the same time, this is the time to bring the international community and the regional community and the neighboring countries to at least do certain things. So I have been talking about the humanitarian issues, talking about providing greater protection, and I have also worked with the Rohingyas in such a way that we can upscale their educational opportunities for the Rohingya and for the host communities, so that they can be more self-reliant, and also because they will not become a lost generation or a lost population. And all that is actually very concrete steps that can be taken and can be supported by international and regional unity. And I think that the whole thing now is to be able to see as much as possible that we can speak with one voice, and also to ensure that the actions are very much linked to the realities on the ground and support the will and the aspiration of the people.